guys, welcome back to the What's Next podcast. Today we've got an amazing guest, Miss Maia Dery. Maia is, you're listed on the computer as a philosopher, a surfer, and a teacher. Now, you've only been in, a lot of my clients I see over and over again, and I know their background, I know quite a bit. You are in from North Carolina, so we haven't had all that much time to get acquainted with each other. So I'm going to ask some questions where I understand you've got a podcast also.
It is called Waves to Wisdom Interviews.
Oh, perfect.
Yes, and I started it shortly after I left my job teaching in 2018.
Okay.
I taught at a small liberal arts school in North Carolina for 17 years, and I had all this new freedom where I could, go places whenever I wanted to,
Sure.
and decided that one of the things I wanted to do was interview other surfers who looked like they had turned surfing into a wisdom practice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I sought some people out and tried to get them to share what they had learned and how they had discovered this path.
Sure.
And yeah, so that's the podcast, and it has been really an amazing experience to do that and share those stories.
Yeah. As a non-surfer, and I'm sure a lot of people are like that, they look at surfers like it's almost a religion. You can see it in them that they belong to something. Mm. Yeah, whether it's the rhythm of the ocean or whether it's just an interesting, from people that don't surf, you can just feel that connection with the earth or with each other or something. It's really neat. It's neat as an outsider.
It can be all of that. I mean, it's one of those beautiful activities that humans invented. We decided, ancient Hawaiians decided this is a good idea. We should get on boards and stand up and ride these waves.
Right.
And it's one of those activities where, so no matter how much structure or how many of our own standards we try to project into it, the ocean and the waves are so powerful that they're forever decentering the self. Like, it doesn't matter what your ego tries to hang on or extract from that environment. It's so inherently relational all the time, right? When the ocean is getting in you and, it's usually teaching you a lesson. So you're so obviously not in charge. It's a good place to keep your hubris in check and to feel like you're part of something bigger than you are, because you literally are. Literally. Yeah. Yes.
We talked a little bit about when a surfer dies. I see this on TV where they have a huge circle of people that go out there and have almost a ceremony, a circle of surfers. You know what I'm saying?
It is a ceremony. Yes.
Yeah.
We call it a paddle
neat.
out. Yeah.
Paddle out. Okay.
It's so beautiful. I've been a part of a few, and it really it's. Oh my gosh. I mean, it feels like the opposite of putting somebody in a box under a cement headstone, because it's this acknowledgement that we were part of something else and we are going to be part of something else. And I don't, people don't talk about it in those terms, but It just feels that way.
Yeah.
You paddle out, hold hands, have flowers, throw them, and then splash and make a lot of noise, and then paddle back in and have words.
Oh, how cool.
And talk story about whoever it was you lost. And it really does feel like this immersion in change and honoring what was but is no longer.
Right.
Yeah.
Celebration of life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really neat. Yeah.
It is, yeah.
So, philosopher. How did you get that title?
That's a good question. I'm not sure how that happened. It is true that the etymological root of the word philosopher is a lover of ideas.
Oh, okay.
And in that way, I certainly am a person who loves ideas.
Sure.
And that's how I wound up inadvertently, without intending to, teaching at a small college, teaching photography in the art department of this little liberal arts college.
Is that what you were teaching? It was photography?
Yes, that's what I started out teaching.
Okay.
And it's this amazing little school called Guilford College. It was founded by Quakers as a high school in the antebellum South.
I see.
And really takes that tradition very seriously. There's a tree that was alive during the years of the Underground Railroad, and we call it the Underground Railroad tree.
Oh, no kidding.
And take tours out there. It's still there. Right. Big old poplar. And it's the school. It's an urban school. It's in a city, small city, Greensboro, and it has this huge tract of woods, some of which are uncut as far as we know, very old trees. And the students there, like students everywhere, were part of an educational system that so often kind of squashes imagination and encourages adherence to a single standard. And when I started teaching there just part time, just to substitute for somebody who needed some help because their father was ill, and fell in love with the idea of taking these kids out of the box, literally taking them into the woods, and the cameras were a great excuse, and helping them to sort of reweave the magic between their chemistry and physics and philosophy and history classes and what they were sensing directly in those old woods with all of the creatures that were thriving there. And, of course, they loved it because what 20-year-old doesn't want to just run through the woods and act like a kid again? And I loved it because I wanted nothing more than to help people whose minds and bodies felt disconnected to help honor and recognize and strengthen the inherent connection between body and mind that we, of course, all have all the time.
Sure.
So, yeah, I think the philosopher title came from something that I said at some point to somebody about loving ideas, but in a, like a lover of ideas, like in a full-bodied way.
Right.
Where do they come from? Where can you go in your day so that the world is bigger than your imagination, but also inviting your imagination and inviting you into deeper presence as you learn and grow? And that's not something that should be limited to college, but it's certainly something that should be central to college.
Yeah. I love the idea of taking these kids out into the woods.
Oh, yes.
There's just no end to subjects that you can photograph.
There's no end to subjects you can learn about. Yeah, more importantly, learn from.
Right.
And that was the... if there has been an idea that I have fallen in love with above all others as I've learned to talk in those terms, I would say it's that the world beyond what we build and understand and define, that world is not just lying there waiting to be discovered and categorized and classified and poked and prodded and dissected. It's actually waiting to teach us not just lessons, but probably exactly the lessons that we most need to learn, sure, as a species, as a culture, but even as individuals. And so when you ask me if I taught photography, and I say it started there, I learned to surf 5 years into being a professor, an instructor at this little college, and then started to take kids to the water, paddling down rivers, surf lessons on the coast before school started. And, and that, in a lot of ways, it was more direct for them because you can still sort of play it cool in the woods. You can keep your hair combed, you can maintain some sense of control. You've been walking for a long time. If you can walk, you usually know how to do it pretty well.
Right.
But, taking a bunch of kids out into the waves and letting them all learn how to surf together, and everybody sucks when you start. I don't care how gifted you are as an athlete. You don't look anything like the surfers who can surf. And it was just beautiful to watch them kind of be themselves and get to know one another from an authentic, genuine place. And this college amazingly let me, in collaboration with a lot of colleagues, take that idea of being in a place of discovery and sort of recognition of the mystery of all that we don't know, all that we can't define, all that we aren't experts in, but to take the lenses of learning of all these disciplines in academia, to take those out into the place that we all shared. We're all teaching in this one college that exists in this one river basin, this one watershed that empties out into the ocean. What if we took all this learning and we went out into the mystery together and we tried to figure out how we could serve this place
break their defenses down a little bit too as you
Yeah.
take them in there. That's really neat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also give them some, some experience practically applying what it is they're studying in the service of the place where they're studying it. And meanwhile, there's always the water to return to learn from, to play in and with. And it was a beautiful experience, I think, for all of us. And I'm still in touch with many of the students who were involved in that program, in regular contact with my colleagues and collaborators, even though I left the college in 2018. And I know that idea, it's not my idea. There have been plenty of other people, even in contemporary Western culture, who have had this idea of making watersheds central to our idea of place and identity. But it's an idea that I really fell in love with, this idea of water as teacher, as a direct result of kind of getting my ass handed to me by
Sure.
waves on the regular and just relishing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing.
When my kids were little, there was, off the subject a little bit, but it'll circle around. As our school district got bigger, they took one of the schools, and a family named the Free Willies, they funded it, and it's a Free Willy environmental school, which means you do your math problems out underneath a tree. You take them out in the woods and you build longhouses. You teach them, and you're teaching them math, and you're teaching them history, and you're teaching them everything all about it, and they don't even know it. I mean, they know it. They're doing their lessons, but I thought that was a really neat thing. It doesn't have anything to do with the water or watershed, but wherever you are, you need to take these kids in and break them down, show them, not just what it looks like on paper, but why do you need to know mathematics or anything into a lesson, into break it down so they can actually see what they're doing. It was really neat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very few kids get to go to that school. It's a very tough school to get into.
Yeah.
But the ones that do, they just spend their whole, in the winter times and deep snow, they're out there learning and doing hikes, and it was really neat. You're on the right track. I think that's a fantastic thing to do.
It's one of the ideas that I'm a coach now, life coach, leadership, executive coach.
Sure.
That's what I do now to make my living and center the meaning of the service I do in the world. And one of the ideas that's been really helpful talking to clients is the idea of really a question. What will it take to re-enchant your familiar? Like to have the things that you pass every day suddenly be beautiful and mysterious again, and maybe even instructive. And a school like that, a place-based practice like that, where the central challenges and lessons of our lives exist in a habitat on a planet, rotating a sun, getting us in touch with, once again, what it is to be an animal in our habitat, in our place. It really, well, for one thing, it can be a really potent antidote to loneliness, because, we are inherently and intimately connected to our places all the time, whether we want to be or not. And watersheds are a really useful way, a metaphor and a fact. Where I live in North Carolina, I spend most of my time in Wilmington because I like to surf. It's down by the coast.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Home is, where I grew up is in Durham, which is in the same river basin, the same watershed, but upstream. So when I'm in Wilmington, I drink water that has been through 11 municipal treatment plants before it gets to me. And, I'm mostly water. The name of the river is the Cape Fear River. So, walking around there, I'm mostly Cape Fear River, whether I want to be or not. I mean, it doesn't get much more intimate than that.
That's
right?
crazy.
And so I can, I miss the boat on falling in love with math in school. But, I don't have to think very hard to understand that, the hydrodynamics and physics, and there's a lot of math in that, in understanding that water on certain levels. And, that has to do with me. It has to do with the shapes of my body. They were, in a lot of ways, formed by water and its need to flow. And it's, these... I mean, even our language makes it very difficult to talk about. We think about water as a resource or a substance, but we are mostly this. So am I mostly this substance? I mean, it is the stuff of myself, and it's out there in the world. It was just falling free out of the sky here a couple of days ago. If water can be re-enchanted for us in our culture, that means every time we turn on the tap, every time we flush a toilet, every time it rains, we get in touch with this elixir of life, this source. And it really is an inherent intimacy of being alive that our culture has lost, but that everything from our educational institutions to our theological institutions, our professional ones, we could all do a better job of inviting back in.
Well, you were talking about people being alone. That's a huge problem right now.
Yes.
We need to bring the people back together.
Totally.
The loneliness and we, like you're saying, we're not a people that can be alone. We need togetherness.
Yeah, right? We're social primates.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
we evolved these big brains so that we could tell what the other guy's feeling and thinking, and
right.
whether they're,
water
we're
always
in trouble.
seems to run together, doesn't it? If we're all water.
Yeah, that's and it really it is very interesting. I mean, this it's such a it's a chaotic historical moment, obviously, and I think it's so easy to fall into our phones and to get these kind of quick hits of dopamine or pleasure or purpose from algorithms or the outrage that's right there, or even a need for constant information. It's much slower to learn how to get along with somebody. That's a process that's more organic. It happens at the speed of life and not at the speed of the algorithm. But it's just a weak muscle. It's one that we all have, and we don't, I think, feel quite right if we're not using it.
Right. I think there's a lot of fear tied into it, too. I don't want to get intimate with somebody. They might find out all my inner cracks and all my flaws.
Well, they
you don't
will.
want to let people get in, too. They will, truly, right? So, try to keep people away.
Yeah, it's so interesting. As
a life coach, how do you do that? I mean, how do you get somebody to be more social? That's a tough one, because you've got you're trying to protect yourself. You don't want to let anybody in, but you almost have to, or you're going to get caught up into nightmares of problems.
Yeah, of course. It's like not moving. Not socializing. It's a very quick recipe for just general suffering.
Death, right?
Yeah, and then death. That's fascinating. As a coach, your orientation is generally client-centered to the point where you let them define the priorities. And obviously, it has to be a good match, right? I have to be able to sort of share some values and understand the person's needs and priorities and moral center. But certainly, especially in the pandemic, I had a lot of clients who were struggling with loneliness. And, the same tools that I just sort of was casting aspersions on, the phone and the computer, when in 2020, at that point, I would have said, we all need to throw our phones in the ocean. This is ridiculous. It's too much. But some people asked me to start some online groups during the pandemic. And it's been a process of continuing revelation. What is possible in these online settings, and what you can have that you cannot have by definition if everybody is in the same place. So I do think intimacy in and with place is central to being human. And it's also turned out to be just this cornucopia of, I'll call it diversity, but not the way we usually think of diversity, but diversity as in the sort that enhances the power of any living system. If you have more to choose from, the good idea or the good design is much more likely to emerge. And so, I'll have these groups, and there will be somebody who's, a professional creative in Los Angeles, and somebody else who's a professional aid worker in Ethiopia on the same call, struggling with the same issues of connection or disconnection, or distance or proximity. And so I think, the same ways that people can get into these sort of horrifying loops of feedback where your own tendency towards excess in any direction gets promoted and suddenly you've fallen down some conspiracy theory wormhole. I think you can do the same thing with a tendency towards connection and compassion, but you can pick a healthy community that will hold you to your own standards. And that can happen online.
Right.
That can happen in, an AA meeting.
Sure.
That can happen in a Keep Monterey Bay Blue meeting.
Yeah.
It can happen in so many different settings right now that the challenge I have run into with clients is not having no choices, but it's oftentimes having so many choices. They have a hard time figuring out where to start.
That makes good sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're all overwhelmed by a glut in this culture. Food, opportunities to entertain ourselves, even opportunities to inform ourselves. And so being together with somebody else in any capacity is so much better than being lonely.
Right.
That what has been most helpful for me in working with clients is to just, like water, follow the path of least resistance. What is the easiest way for you to connect with somebody?
Yeah.
What is the least frightening way for you to connect with somebody? Okay, let's start there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. A lot of what we were talking about kind of leads to negative things, but that it's nice to hear you talk about how we can use this to push it towards positivity. Yeah.
We absolutely can. I mean, adults need to take adult responsibility for what is completing the open circuit of our senses.
Sure.
to the degree that we can. And, it's difficult for many people in many settings to control their environment. There are work environments. The other day I was getting a coffee, this wonderful coffee shop up the road called Alta. Such an interesting experience in this old adobe. And, I was just in awe of the barista, who was moving about 8 million miles an hour and keeping track of so many things.
Yeah.
And there's so much noise and people talking to her.
Distractions.
And just completely engaged and focused at the same time.
Right.
And thinking that many people could not thrive in that environment.
Right.
And that if I were in that environment, I would get so distracted I would mess up everybody's coffee.
Sure.
And I don't know what that person does in their time away from that, but I suspect that it is something that balances the weight of all of that stimulation.
Right.
And I think for all of us, we have some kind of need that is usually not getting met during our obligatory time, our work time, our family time. And we've gotten farther away from being able to discern what will balance that for us.
Sure. I bet she's a fantastic surfer.
She's a fantastic something. Surfer, meditator, bowler. I don't know what it is.
Right.
but
I think of the ocean as something that you can't contend with. It's so powerful, and you have to deal with that.
You have to deal with that.
Right.
Right.
And you deal with everything else, a million things that are going on, but you can't argue with the power of the ocean.
Well, and you have to know yourself.
This sounds like that kind of girl, huh?
Yeah, you have to know yourself.
Yeah, there you go.
And that's what I'm really talking about is that, I don't know how tall you are, but you could be 10 feet tall. I don't know. Anything over 6 feet is very tall to me. What if you were a surfer and we were out there surfing together, contending with the power of the ocean would be different for you than it is for me. And so I have to know that, I weigh about 105 pounds. And, a lot of the people I surf with weigh 2 or more times what I weigh.
Sure.
And, right.
They don't just spring up on their board like you do, huh?
Well, maybe. Or maybe, they're 30-year-olds and they do spring up in a way that at 57 I am no longer springing.
That's a good point.
But the point is that it's these practices of creating enough quiet and space so that we can connect with what we need to balance the stimulation, the solitude, whatever it is that we have a little bit too much of. It's so easy if you get a little bit hungry to just stuff the first thing you see in your mouth. That's the culture we've created.
Sure.
And it's so easy if you get a little bit lonely just to pick up the first device that you see and try to fill that hole.
Right.
But there are a lot of traditions that help people, and Christians have prayer-centered traditions, and Buddhists have mindfulness-centered traditions, and certainly there are many, many others. But there are so many different just ways, paths, little communities that you can reach out to without even being seen, just online, and start to connect to these practices of creating a little bit of opening, just a little bit of space, where you can begin to feel what it is that's missing in your life.
Right.
And nobody else can tell you that. I mean, people can look at you and guess, but they can't tell you.
Sure.
You're going to have to figure it out for yourself.
Right.
And that is, I think, something that was really made manifestly clear in the pandemic, that we don't have the resilience that we need, many of us, to go through periods of sort of extended disconnection from our habitual means of support, whatever they are, right? And I had so many people who just absolutely lost their minds because they couldn't go to the gym. And I understand that, but the gym is not an end in itself.
It's a purpose.
Yeah.
Kind of. But...
And there are people who go to that gym who are also going through what you're going through. So, and if you don't know any of their last names, okay, well, that's unfortunate, but that's an indication that there's another way to do this. Maybe making deeper connections with the people who you share interests with, so that if the gym has to close for a month or a year, you can figure out a way to exercise together in the park.
Right.
Right. If you have that kind of capacity.
Right.
And, sure, there were a lot of people who didn't have that. They were trapped in some small apartment in some small city, and it wasn't about just not being able to go to the gym. But the people who I work with tended to be running into things like that. And I think, now that we're out of it, there's such an impulse to just forget about it and move on. But I do think, and this is sort of the artist in me, it's a good time to reflect and revise, to look back and say, okay, something happened and I couldn't be with people, and I really felt like I was completely cut off from people. How can I, in the future, be in a situation where no matter what, I don't have to feel so cut off?
Right.
And again, the answer to that design challenge is going to be different for different people. I found a lot of solace myself during the pandemic in poetry.
Did you?
There were so many poets who suddenly just went online.
Oh, sure. Right.
Right?
Right.
There was this Poem a Day podcast that started where the National Poetry Foundation started sending out a poem every day. And this huge community developed around, people just suddenly needing this kind of poetic engagement in the world. And, that it told me something about something that had been missing in my life since I'd left the college, which is, this sort of mutual exploration of these sort of existential mysteries, where nobody's in charge and nobody is giving you an agenda and nobody's giving you a syllabus, but there's sort of emergent property to what this group of people is contending with, and we're all honest about not knowing what the hell is next or even what the hell is happening right now.
Right.
But it really did draw me into sort of connection and a kind of community or communion with people I would not have come across otherwise.
Right.
So
Like-minded people.
Like-minded people who find sort of solace and beauty in similar ways, and I think it's not easy. I don't mean to imply that it's easy, but it is simple to create space in your life for something, meditation, walks, deep breaths, so that you can start to feel what is missing
For sure.
and act on it.
The many things. You know, I was thinking, I don't have a whole lot of self-esteem, I guess, as a human. So people like me, I guess, will find something that we're really good at, you know, and we'll center on that. And then people will come to us that way. And then we find like-minded people that way, I guess.
I mean, I think if I could just repeat to you what I think I just heard you say.
Sure.
That if you're not sure what you have to offer,
right,
and you find something
right,
that you can be absolutely secure
sure,
in the quality of your offering,
right, right,
then that's a comfortable and really, I think, likely and productive way to try to engage with the community.
Right, right.
Did I hear that right?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, you try to find something that you excel at, and you kind of circle yourself around that. Now, in a pandemic situation, and they say, okay, you have to close. You're done. It's like, well, I kind of, I came to the point where I thought, wow, it's amazing how my self is so wrapped around what I do. That can't be good. You have that realization like, oh, I might just be too wrapped up without myself. I need to kind of find. Do you know where I'm getting at?
I think I might.
Once they shut me down after a few months, it was like, who am I? What's my purpose in life? What do I do now? Yeah, you know, it's like, am I going to be able to open my business back up? I don't know. It was scary because that's my identity almost. It's like you had to reevaluate your whole way of thinking at that point, going, wow, I am way off.
So hard.
It's almost a good thing that we went through it to reevaluate who we are and what we think about.
My gosh, yeah. I mean, it is so hard, and especially somebody like you. You know, I met you because I have this shoulder problem that's keeping me out of the water, and
Sure.
it's sort of, you know, I'm trying not to let it be at the center of every single waking moment, but
Yeah.
you know, I really love to surf.
That's part of it.
And you know, you helped me already.
Good.
One time, and I can't, you know, I've never done body work for anybody else or anything like that. I've only sort of worked with people's ideas and
Sure.
beings in less corporeal ways. I mean, I can imagine how gratifying it must be to be able to help somebody
Exactly.
in their primary dwelling space, which is our own bodies.
Right.
And to then not be able to do that would be, I mean, it's a kind of a traumatic loss.
It's
really. And as you say, I mean, you're talking like an artist. I mean, it's this sort of a little bit of a wake up. It's like, oh, well, I didn't like how that felt.
Yeah.
To have so much of my life wrapped up, so much of my idea of myself
Right.
wrapped up in being able to do this one thing this one way.
Exactly.
And I can also see for somebody in your, just to relate back to what we were talking about, how our moment in history offers all these challenges, but also all of these opportunities. You know how to touch a muscle and feel things that I don't know how to do.
Right.
And if I could find somebody online who could talk me through even any version of doing for myself what you did for me,
Right.
I would gladly pay for that service.
Sure.
I spend a few months of every year in Costa Rica where, I can't just run up and get a massage from you.
Right.
Every couple of weeks. So, there are those kinds of moments where, okay, I couldn't do this thing that I know I'm good at.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there's a way that in the future I could allow myself the creativity to find a way to do this thing that I know I'm good at, not because my life depends on doing this thing, but because serving a community in a capacity that seems important and that I know I can pull off. That is part of why I'm here.
For sure.
And it's, I know that everybody in this culture focuses too much on what we do for a living. It's the one thing you're allowed to talk about at cocktail parties and dinner parties. What do you do? Nobody means, where do you surf? They all mean, how do you make your money? And, that is a problem. And I also think that for those of us who are motivated by some sense of service or usefulness, if our purpose comes from making people's lifetime somehow qualitatively better in their lives, like, the experience day to day of their lives, this moment does offer us ways to figure out how to do that that nobody else in any era has had access to.
Yeah.
And that's what the pandemic taught me, is that I could no longer, I was taking people on these surf trips and sort of having these embodied coaching moments with folks, and that all had to stop.
Took that right away.
And I would have never done anything on Zoom in a million years, but now I'd no longer take people on surf trips, and now I have all these Zoom groups.
Sure.
And so there's, depending on your circumstances, if you have the resources to do something more than just survive, which I know some people especially didn't during the pandemic, if you have the psychological resources, the temporal resources, the time and the energy to do something more than survive, I do think thinking, well, what could be improved about the design of my thinking, the design of my life, my habits, so that I have more resilience and a greater capacity to give, no matter what the circumstances.
Right.
It's a reasonable and I think potentially beautiful question.
Sure.
To guide a life, especially, maybe not when you're 20 or 30, but, when you're 50 or 60.
Yeah.
It is all going to change. And
Sure
it is all
rapidly
going to be in the process of going away. So, it's, I felt especially for young people in the pandemic, it's a very different era of life. For me, it felt like a little bit of almost aging boot camp. Like, get ready. It's all going away anyway. And now you get to practice. Are you going to bring curiosity or panic? Right? Are you going to bring drama or levity? Like, what resources are you going to develop to bring to this situation? And yes, you're scared shitless, but what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. I was just trying to find things to keep my monkey mind quiet. Paint by numbers. I picked up an old fishing boat for $100 that was sitting in somebody's tree line. It was just falling apart, and I had to rebuild it.
Oh my God,
just
that's so
picking
beautiful.
up all kinds of different things like that, and I could work on, and just a little bit at a time, an old car or something, just to keep my brain working. But that's not, at first I wanted to help people that needed to get their groceries or did that kind of thing, but nobody called. They don't want to put me in danger or whatever. So it's like, okay, so I need to find something else to do to help people. What can I do? And it was rough because people are so scared of you, and
yes,
I was thinking it's very interesting. I think it's very important for somebody to have something in their life that they're very good at, because they need to sometimes. We touched on this a little bit the last time we were here, but say when I was quitting drinking. I would have to think of the most beautiful frosty beverage that, I just love beer. And then I have to quick think of something really quick to sorry, banging on the table. But a lot of things, sometimes we were talking about this surfer that Tony Robbins was working with. And he was having a lot of problems with math and English and that kind of thing. And Tony would come in and start talking to him about his surfing and how do you do this particular curl, or how did you have your feet? And the guy, you could tell the kid was just, he got into it, explaining, and then bang, it would slam him into math. Well, what is that? And then you would take him back to surfing and slam his brain back into math at the same time while he was fired up about the ocean, and it turned the scholastic problems into something that he was tied into something that he loved. You know what I'm saying? So I think sometimes you need something in your life that you love, that you can somehow lend that to something. Do you get what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're fueled as animals by hormones that make us want more.
Sure.
That's what makes us work. And we train ourselves sometimes unintentionally in what it is that we want more of. And past a certain age, we have responsibility for what we want more of. And the story that you just told is a beautiful one about an elder helping a youth figure out how this magical world and this obligatory world are one world. They're the same world.
Right.
And the tragedy of the pandemic, from my perspective, is that it deepened what are really artificial barriers that we have put all over our brains and our worlds, thinking this is math and this is surfing, right? This is work and this is play. This is selfish, this is service. And, it's much more, well, let me make a visual reference. If I say balance to my clients, they often think in terms of a seesaw or a two-pan scale, right? Where there's, for example, work, life, these two things.
Oh, right.
And you take from one and you add to the other, right? But that's not the way balance works in any living system, including a human body, right? If you do yoga and you stand on one foot, balance is not about, taking a little piece there and putting it here, or, what happens between two sides. You can't even tell what's going on. You're either falling over or you're staying up, but there's about 5,000 things happening at any given moment.
Right.
And so much of it is sort of sub-awareness level. And in any life, that is exactly what is required. And we all need to be rebalancing all the time. Our bodies are doing it without our awareness all the time.
Right.
But what we need to do is sort of extend that magic, I think. And, I understand there are scientific explanations for a lot of that, but we can't live in that world, right? We can't function at that speed where we're constantly analyzing all the chemical and hormonal reactions. But to take that magic that keeps you breathing, whether you're paying attention to your breath or not, into the world of intention and obligation. So the ways that I think that works best is precisely what you put your finger on. If we have a passion, any passion, flower arranging, surfing, bowling, we know how to love. We know how to put something in front of ourselves that structures our desire for more-ness, right? I really want to hang 10 before I'm dead.
Right.
I don't know that I'll ever get there.
Right.
And it doesn't matter, honestly. It's just about the structure of desire. The structure
to
of
strive.
effort.
Sure.
Yes. And understanding from, being old and doing it unhealthy ways so many different times and so many different settings with so many different, substances and devices,
Sure.
career paths, that you actually have a lot of power over what you put in front of you as the object of your desire.
Yeah.
And it's almost always something relatively simple that is going to give you the best immediate results. And by simple, again, I do not mean easy. I just mean not overcomplicated.
Sure.
Right. So you break it down. This kid already loves surfing.
Right.
Math is complicated. Yeah, but love is not. Love of surfing is not complicated.
Good point. Right.
And in that love of surfing, there is an applicable metaphor. There is an applicable lesson for his loathing of math. And I love the story that you told about, I was a body worker and I was really helping people and I had to do something. You had to do something with your hands. You were basically doing for the boat what you couldn't do for the bodies.
Right.
And what I would say, if you were my client while you were doing that, I probably would have said something to you like, okay, you are one of we don't know how many people who are going through not a version of this, but this version of this.
Right.
How many body workers can't touch bodies right now? It's got to be many, many thousands in this country alone, right? What are they doing something that's that adaptive? Are they rebuilding a boat? Maybe a lot of them are not. Maybe they're reaching for something that's not so good for them.
Good point. Right.
So is there a way that you can imagine trying to reach out and be in community with them and say, hey, I'm doing this. What are you guys doing to keep sane? To keep the monkey from strangling you.
Exactly.
The monkey mind,
it's the
right?
truth, isn't it?
Yeah, and so it's a shift in your community of service, but it's not a total shift, right? The kid's still thinking about surfing as he's struggling with math. You're still thinking about body work as you're struggling with not being able to touch bodies.
Right.
And I think most of us have that kind of shift. Most of us who love something about our lives have that kind of simple, again, not easy, I'm not saying it's easy,
Sure.
but relatively straightforward shift in attention that with practice and a lot of falling off the board, we can get better at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, you talk about the mind. I deal more with a physical body, but I know when I'm working on, say, a shoulder that just it won't go down. It's stuck up there, and I'll put some pressure down on it, and I'll have the client push up as hard as you can against that. Now let go, and it drops to where it's supposed to be. It felt like it was sitting on concrete before because the brain was saying it can't go any further, and it literally bang, it stops right there. Until I put pressure on it, hold that, retrain the brain, and it lets go. Now,
How about that?
That's a physical thing. But I bet you there's all kinds of things inside of the mind that do that exact same thing.
Absolutely.
Oh, I can't figure that out. Bang, concrete wall.
Yep.
Even though you could, but there's something in your brain saying, I can't do it, or I couldn't do it before. So, it's going to be too painful. That's the thing. That's a mental thing too, right?
Absolutely.
It's going to be too
Danger.
painful.
Scared.
Danger.
I'm
Stop
scared.
there. I'm scared. I can't go any further. I will be hurt. That's what I deal with on a physical. And I like I say, I wonder if that's in the mind too. It's got to be.
Well, it's absolutely in the mind. I mean, and it's not. It's not there for no reason. I mean, most people are scared because they got scared of something that was potentially dangerous one or more times in the past.
Yeah.
And so it's much more about developing the capacity to discern where the danger is in the present. Right. And if there's one skill that I have worked so hard, and often failed and still fail all the time, but that it's been the most sort of the greatest return on investment. It's about presence, being just fully aware of what is happening in the moment, whether
Sure.
that's deep listening to somebody else
Sure.
or the world, or trying to figure out what is my body trying to tell me, what is it saying in the only language it has, which is tension or pain or stiffness. That ability to perceive the way a strength or a flexibility that we have in one area of our life could be applied to another area of our life, that is something that we could all, I think, use a little more practice in. So, shoulder that won't go down up against concrete, that person can probably relax their other shoulder or their calf or their hip. And I think the division, the barrier in our thinking, well, this shoulder is messed up and this shoulder is healthy, I'm not sure that's very useful. It's much more to think about, okay, this shoulder currently has some information that this shoulder doesn't, and vice versa. How can they inform each other? I've got this expert in the room who understands something about tension and relaxation, who understands something about danger and safety. How can I let this person inform this shoulder? There is a kind of vulnerability that we're not encouraged to have, but that is absolutely vital to growth, to change, to letting go of what was, and being able to fully embrace what is. And I think that is embodied in your brain and in the rest of your body.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe mental things can be pushed through like that, like a physical.
Yeah, all the time.
You push all that pressure against that, and once it let go, it lets go. Maybe there's something mental exercise that we could do to get past these mental blocks that we have.
I mean, I think often articulating them and taking them to their extreme.
Go. Sure.
Right? Just let's articulate. Let's talk about the worst
Right,
thing that
let's
could
do-
happen right here. What is actually the disaster that you're
That's
afraid
exactly
of?
what I'm talking
Okay,
about.
well, I'm going to
But
look
take
stupid.
it to the
Okay, well,
right.
yes, you're probably going to look stupid no matter what you do at some point. The question is, are you going to treat that with humor and,
right.
are you is yourself really the most important thing in this, for example, speech that you're giving? Or is the content the most important thing?
Right.
If it really is a presentation of yourself, if you're there to sell yourself, let's make sure you don't look stupid. But if it's not really about you, and you wind up looking stupid and getting everybody to laugh with you, then you have just served this higher purpose of the content of this talk.
Probably made it more memorable.
You absolutely have made it more memorable. Yeah. And it's those moments of turning, of unexpected change, of coming up against something that seems impenetrable but then turns out to be surmountable. They're often unpredictable, but there are people like you, people like, the coach who you described with the surfer, who have practice getting people to bump in a safe way up against that limit, and then figuring out it's porous. It's not a wall. It's a membrane. There are ways to pass through this.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So have you written any books? What have you been up to?
Oh my goodness! I wrote one book one time and swore I would never do it again. So hopefully
As
I'll
I'm writing my
stick to
second
that.
one.
Yeah. I've been seeing my clients, and when my shoulder's not angry with me, surfing waves. I do write. I write every day.
Do you? Oh, neat.
Yes, I love to write, and maybe I'll write another book someday, but I hope not.
With a purpose in mind, or are you just doing like a memoirs kind of?
I have kept a journal most of my life, and so there's that. I inadvertently, almost exactly a year ago, started writing poetry.
No kidding.
I have loved poetry my whole life,
Wow.
and it's always been kind of a guide to me. And I have a dear friend, former student, whose sister is a poet and was starting to teach these online workshops. And in an effort to be supportive, I signed up for one, having never written any poetry. And oh my gosh, I just fell in love, head over heels. Yeah,
really?
It was a completely different way of occupying a moment to try to write a poem. And so now I get up every morning and try to write a poem. And most of them suck, and every once in a while there's one that's right. less than important, and that's been really amazing, and mostly just give them to friends or read them to my
just wordsmithing people. How fun.
Yeah, it's about to me it's like this almost incantatory practice where you're trying to summon this.
What's incantatory mean?
Like incantation, like it's almost like a spell.
Right.
There's a way that you feel in response to the world, and you're trying to come up with words that have some chance of evoking that feeling in someone else or in yourself, who will be someone else in an hour or a day or a year. You'll be a different person. It's been really, it's given me a much greater appreciation for the poets I've always loved. How hard what they do is.
Right.
And it's a lot like photography. Interestingly, it's a way of being in the world and encouraging a kind of deepening of attention and awareness that every other cultural artifact is pushing you out of. Right, everything around you is encouraging you to scroll down or swipe left or whatever it is, buy the next thing, and so just to stare at a seed head every day for minutes and minutes and minutes and try to think about what words are going to do the thing that seed head is doing to you is a quality of attention that I have found to be really useful, not only in my own well-being, but in my capacity to be with my clients in ever deeper ways. That's a
neat thing.
It's wonderful. And I feel like my central job right now, I'm 57, like a little baby old lady.
So am I.
Yeah, how about that?
Right on.
Peers. We can go down some memory lanes.
While we still have it.
That's right, exactly. I feel like eldering is really missing from our culture.
It is.
And I think it needs to come back. I don't know if it ever will, because of technological change. Sort of makes all old people look stupid, and also the generation that preceded us didn't do us any favors, I don't think. But we need both the fresh ideas of young people who are outraged that things aren't better, and the sort of quieter wisdom of older people who have tried and failed at a great many things.
Right.
We need all of those energies and everything in between. So for me right now, writing poetry is a good way. It's sort of the perfect counterbalance to surfing, which is kind of inherently stimulating and big, right? It's always huge and complicated and requires you to pay attention to a zillion things at once. Poetry is about really settling into some kind of one, just one.
Right.
Yeah. So it's been a great gift and another one of those things I never would have anticipated.
You know, I'm a big record collector. I like going through the antique shops and finding old records. And I bought an old Beach Boys album, and when I got it home, it wasn't a Beach Boys album. It was a poet, and I don't remember his name. It slips my mind, but it was on a faster speed, which they don't make. So you know, I had to kind of turn it a little faster. I wish I could remember his name, but he recorded it onto a record. But it was an amazing poem about walking through this, I believe there were cedar trees and birch trees. I'm sorry, walking through the birches, and he would talk about how as the snow fell last night, the boughs kind of bent over a little bit, and he said it reminds me of when I was a child. We used to climb to the top of the birch trees until it slowly bent over and it set you back on the ground. And he's like, now wouldn't that be great if life did that? If you could climb the birch tree, get older, and it slowly set you back down as a child again. And keep doing that. I thought, wow, that's a really neat way of looking at it. You probably know who
That's
I'm talking
beautiful.
about.
Well, I'm not sure it's the same poem, but Robert Frost.
That's who it was.
That's
who I couldn't
yes,
remember
has
the
a
name.
famous poem about birches.
Is that what it was?
Yes.
I was like, holy cow, that's what a poem is?
Yes.
I didn't know.
A poem is just a song with a different kind of music.
That's really right.
That's all it is.
Yeah, right.
Just creating an experience for a listener.
Well, actually, they say that about a lot of musicians. They were poets. Like the
Absolutely.
Doors. Yeah, he was a poet, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's one of the just tragedies of our educational system is that poetry gets ruined for so many people.
Yeah.
It, turns into some kind of map where you're supposed to get to some kind of single destination, and
Right.
you have to know all the keys and the symbols, and it just doesn't work that way. It's not what it's about. Yeah, that's a beautiful. I don't know if you link to things on the podcast, but
Should probably link that up.
that up,
right.
yeah.
Well, I've got the album. I mean, it's an old album. I don't know,
That's
75
beautiful.
speed or something.
Yeah.
It's like it's really old.
Yeah, I think there may be a recording of him reading that poem online.
So we'll have to. I wonder if we can link that too. We'll just do that.
Yeah, I bet you could.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, so it's been really the latest in a series of surprising gifts that come from getting older and not being able to do the things that I did before in the same way.
Yeah.
And when I was young, I thought, well, it would just be a chain of unbroken and unmitigated loss, but that's not true. Every time something goes away, there's 10 other beautiful things waiting for their chance.
Right.
And that, nobody told me that. It's like nobody warned me about a lot of things that were going to be hard about life, but nobody also warned me about a lot of things that were going to be increasingly beautiful and gratifying about life.
Right.
And so I feel very lucky and
I think
fortunate.
the people that raised us and the people that raised them went through such hard times. There wasn't that much joy.
I think for a lot of people that's true. Yeah.
You live through. I think about that sometimes when I think of the people that I've known in my life. And they're all gone. Not all, but the people that were born in the 1800s. The people that had lived through, my great-grandma saying, I didn't know what the human body would do if we hit a mile a minute. We thought it might explode. Or, that's only 60 miles an hour. We do that all the time,
right.
But they literally went to school on horses. And and these people I knew, and now I think that all that is gone now. But I guess we're that. Now we're the older ones that people are looking at going, oh, God, they've been alive since the 60s,
That's
right?
They went to college without the internet, and we did.
I know, right? Exactly. I think I was 35 when the internet went out on the windows, or you get to actually connect it and talk to people.
Yeah, I mean, it's in some ways it feels like, just as big a change as not even the car, but going from only horses and human feet to railroads. There's these collapsing of time and distance, and I mean, we're going through some big technological changes in very rapid fire succession, and it's a wild ride.
It's interesting to think about the people that we knew when we were kids and what they had been through.
Yeah.
We didn't really know it at the time, and a lot of times I say, I wished I would have known what to ask my grandparents.
Oh my goodness, yes.
I wish I could go back and have a conversation with them now, not as a 15-year-old, but as a grown-up, you know? They talk about these interesting times, and it's like, dang, I didn't have any interest in that now, at that time.
Yeah,
I want to know more now, but it's gone.
It's gone. Yeah, I mean, my grandparents were born in 1910 and 1912.
Yep.
So, they both had clear memories of World War II and the Depression. And,
Sure.
And, some memories of World War I. And it's just, I didn't ask them about any of that ever. So
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Right.
It is.
My grandpa was a top golfer. He'd come out here and he'd go golfing with his buddies, Bing and Bob. And it's like, oh, that's cool. But it's like, what? Now I want to talk to him about it, Desi Arnaz, you hung out with that guy? Like,
wow.
That's it didn't mean anything back then.
Of course not.
So
really interesting.
That's things for you kids. Ask your old people what
well, I mean,
before they're gone.
That's part of what I mean when I say we've lost this culture of eldering. We should be sitting around the campfire, regularly, several times a year, listening to the old people talk story, and maybe we'll roll our eyes, but at least we'll remember it.
Right.
And they're just there isn't a lot of that. I know there's some grandmas on TikTok and stuff, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about your book. What was that all about?
Oh, it was a youthful indiscretion. Some publisher was, I talked to a guy who was a local publisher saying, I was working weekends at this little outdoor store, and I talked to this publisher and said, we really need a local guidebook. And he said, yeah, we do. Why don't you write it? And I was, 28, and I thought, oh, this will be cool.
Perfect.
It was not cool.
It's not cool.
It was the opposite of cool. I mean, it's
everything but cool.
It was basically an enormous. It was like an archival project. Of course, you're gathering all of these little pieces of information, all of which have to be exactly correct. Go 0.2 miles and turn left at this triple birch, whatever, and then laying them back out for somebody in an organized manner. Well, this is the opposite of my character. I mean, I take any organized pile and just try to make something pretty and chaotic out of it.
Right.
And so it was very difficult for me to pull that off. It took 8 years. I had to go every single place 3 times. I would get home and look at my notes, and nothing would make sense. This was, I was measuring all these hikes with a footage wheel. This was before
there were
no apps.
Yeah,
so I was pushing
right.
a little orange wheel and counting feet. So that was the one book that I have published, and so
I saw that on the internet. I thought I had to touch base on it anyways.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it was a wonderful experience in a lot of ways, because I'm one of the few people I know who, I've lived my entire conscious life in one river basin, one watershed. And so I have this sense of home that I think a lot of people don't have.
Right.
And what that kind of long-term relationship does. That was really the awakening, was right then in my 20s when, all of my friends were going off to, California and Alaska and wherever they were going, Machu Picchu, because I hung out with a very outdoorsy crowd. And I kept having to go to the same places around home. And at first it felt like a great tragedy. But then I started to realize something about the quality of experience of deepening rather than broadening that I think set me on a path that I've been on ever since. So even though it was difficult,
right,
I think it was worthwhile.
So it was good.
It was very good.
A couple of weeks ago we had a gal in here. She was a playwright. And she was talking about the playwright she had written about the art revolution in France in the end of the 1800s to mid to 1800s, and all of these different books that she had to go through and get these little tiny pieces of information here and there and there and there, and then at the end put it all together. Sounds kind of like what you were talking about. It's like all of a sudden writing this book doesn't sound like any fun to me at all.
I mean, and I know so many people who, with the Post-it notes and the paper
Sure,
clips,
right,
and they're
right.
so good at that,
Yeah.
and I just
It's
really...
not my wheelhouse.
No, not even close. Yeah, so, who knows? It's possible that I might pull, the however many thousands of pages I've written together and do something with them, but I hope
Sure.
not.
Yeah. It sounds like a nightmare.
I'd rather go surfing. Yeah.
Well, not too long ago, I was going through some older stuff of my grandma's, and I came across her memoirs of her trip around the world in 1934.
Holy cow.
So I had one of my clients come in, sit right where you are, and read it. It was about a 4-hour read.
Wow.
Through the San Francisco, up through the Chicago World's Fair, and getting
Amazing.
on a cattle ship or a ship or something, and going across and sailing up the Barbary Coast and getting India, and it's like, wow.
Did she travel alone?
She traveled alone.
Wow.
By herself. She was about 28.
Holy cow.
Yeah, she was one of the head secretaries at Eagle Lion Studios. So she had some connections, and somebody said, "You want to go? You're going now or you're not going." She's like, "Okay." And so she did it, So, but that maybe your memoirs will be written someday and read out loud, or maybe you can turn them into some kind of, just keep writing them,
Yes.
It's interesting stuff, even though you don't think it's interesting. And my grandma probably didn't think that was all.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in the moment. It's just that I'm always so interested in the new moment.
Right. Just keep stacking them up, though.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Good reference of your life.
Yeah. And, there are so many interesting lives right now. And it's... Yeah, I love creative processes, and I take pictures and write almost every day. And I even love to revise. It's not that I am opposed to revising, but there is a sort of a flux that I am comfortable with, that if I try to block, so that this is the end of this body of information, and I'm just going to pay attention to these inputs now until this is some version of done that has something to do with the publishing industry or some pre-existing standards, then I'm just really, on some level, immediately, viscerally rebellious and outraged and just fussy in my soul.
Right.
And I would do it if I had to. I would be a grown up and settle down. But the only reasons that I've ever been drawn, since that one experience of writing the book, of doing something like writing another book, every once in a while I'll have an ego moment and think, oh well, most people who are from my world, who have respect in my world, do something like this. They write a book. And then what does that get them? Well, then they have to go on a book tour, and then they have to go someplace where the waves are not good, where the waves are good at home. And then all these people are following them online, and then they have to post online. It's very hard for me to see how it leads any place better than waking up tomorrow and starting a new poem that might or might not suck.
How about that?
Yeah.
That takes inner strength, though, because there's something telling you this is what everybody does.
This is what everybody does.
But I don't want to do that. I want to do this.
Yes.
That takes inner strength.
I don't
it really
know if
does.
It's strength. It's interesting.
Fear? I don't know.
There's a woman named Maria Popova who she has my favorite blog called The Margin Alien, and she sort of writes about usually 2 or sometimes 1 up to 3 linked pieces of writing, usually from history, around a single idea. And she wrote a book called Figuring, and the book is essentially about various people who would fall into the category now we have of various queer people through history, right? People like Emily Dickinson, who are clearly not heterosexual, although they never really acted,
but they
as far
were,
as we know. But she has this theory, and it's interesting. Since I read that book, I have thought this is probably where this comes from, because I was not heterosexual in a time when that was not cool. Right. That was not, I mean, it didn't, there was no part of me that was interested, even internally, in figuring that out, because there was no incentive to go there.
Right.
And the thing that I think it allowed me, I mean, I could feel sorry for myself, like, oh, I missed all this. I could have been dating in my youth and I didn't, et cetera. But looking back at it, I feel the opposite, which is that I had to develop this whole alternative way of being where I knew, even though I didn't know why, I knew that there was this whole undertaking that all of my peers were engaged in, that I had absolutely no interest in. And so I had to have this parallel track, because I still, wanted love and friendship and all of those things, but I didn't want to do that. So I had to be both of and not of this peer group. And so I don't think I can take credit for having any kind of inner strength. I think it was just habit born of necessity.
Right.
be out of difference.
Still.
And I think I was lucky. I think probably a lot of it comes from my mother, who just loved the hell out of us.
Yeah.
No matter what.
She's a super strong lady.
She's a super strong
Yeah,
lady.
yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Super strong lady. Very, very loving and appreciative just in general in her life. And, and so I think I had this sort of backstop of knowing that I was supported and, the bottom wasn't going to fall out.
That's got to be so important.
It must be. I mean, it was like the air I breathed. I didn't
Right.
run around feeling grateful for it. It was just like my mom being annoying and telling me whatever good thing she was telling me that day, rolling my eyes.
So proud of you. Yeah,
whatever. If only you knew, Mom. But yeah. But no, I mean, I think there is something about being different that we tend to look at people who are sort of outcasts in some way. In our culture, and I think that we're often encouraged to feel like we've been somehow done wrong, and even identify with that, like I have been oppressed, or I have been disrespected, or I have been overlooked. In my personal experience, being overlooked was probably the best thing that could have happened to me when I was young, and being left out of so much of what I was left out of was the best thing that could have happened to me, because it left me a kind of freedom that I think a lot of my peers did not have.
Yeah.
And, then I was able to exist in these other systems like a college where, I was absolutely as low status as you could be and still be an instructor, a professor.
Right.
I was a visiting lecturer for 17 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And
really?
Yes, never got a raise, never got a promotion.
17 years.
17 years. Talk about the guest who wouldn't leave. Yeah, that's some visitor. But, it was perfect for me because I wasn't there to be a part of that system of promotions and tenure and so-called security. I was there to take students into the woods. I was there to serve some truth that was bigger than this academic truth, and that this academic truth was an important part of, but was not the beginning, middle, or end of. It was just a part.
You had to feel like you fit that role, though.
There was nobody else doing it.
There's nobody else with it.
I mean, honest to goodness, it was one of those moments, and this was later in my life when I realized, okay, really, I'm the person who has to do this? There's somebody better qualified who can do this thing that clearly needs to happen? No, of course, it's got to be me. If not me, who?
Interest and happiness, and I think that gets you halfway there anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt like I was doing what I was supposed to do.
Right on.
It was not, I was an artist, not a scholar, and I was there doing this social sculpture, and we were going to make meaning together, and the students could see and feel and know things that I couldn't. I could see and feel and know things that they couldn't, and those old trees could see and feel and know things that none of us could. And together, maybe we could make something of that moment that we shared in that time and place. And I think on some level I'm, still both in and out of some system.
Yeah.
When I'm in the ocean.
Sure.
When I'm at the Safeway, wherever I am.
Yeah.
And we all are. It's just for whatever reason I was allowed to get comfortable existing in that kind of liminal space.
Yeah.
Where you are both of and not of the circumstance.
Sure, right.
Yeah.
Do you do any meditation, that kind of thing? Do you?
I do, yes.
Yoga and
I do yoga.
I
do yoga and meditation. Yes, wow. Yes. I have. I'm sort of I'm not a perfect meditator, by which I mean I'm not a perfect seated meditator. I think
I see, right.
Yeah, I would say I probably get to it. If I do it less than maybe 4 times a week, then I can feel my anxiety levels start to creep up.
Right.
So I do it medicinally, I think. I discovered at some point.
I think a lot of stuff that you do is active meditation.
That is, I think, I think is absolutely true, is how do you move with presence is I think a lot of what I've spent my life trying to figure out. And the camera just gave me an excuse for really seeing things. Right. You could take as long as you needed to really see something, and then you came back with this little product that justified it.
You have to get out there to get that scene too. You got.
I just wanted to get out there.
Right.
It's just an excuse. Right. Yeah. So.
I know. I took some photography classes in school many, many moons ago, but I remember standing in the dark room back in the old days,
yes.
Right? Where we don't do that anymore. But every once in a while, I'll take a picture and it's like, wow, that's really amazing. I was just walking down the trail over here, and there was a tree branch hanging over, and the beautiful beach and all that with Monterey and the ocean in the background, and take a picture like, hey, wow, that's
Beautiful. Yeah,
that's
the light
beautiful.
here is incredible. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
no accident that so many famous photographers came
sure,
from or to this
right,
incredible place.
yeah,
So atmospheric and exciting and various and yeah, it's yeah, I mean photography is really all about, to me it's all about receptivity. That camera is an aperture, it's an opening, so it's about receiving relationships. It's always
sure,
something in relation to something else out there in the world. And when, how can you change your perspective so that the composition matches what is being composed by the life forces that you find central?
mm-hmm,
And so, for me, I've always, and I didn't know this forever, but I've always been drawn to these repetitive branching patterns, which I learned at a much later point in my life were fractals. These patterns, like the branching veins of a leaf or branches of a tree or the human circulatory system, basically
so
these mathematical patterns that repeat across scale. If you look at it in a tiny piece or a bigger piece, they look the same, they look similar.
right,
And, there's something about coming across two veined leaves overlapping in a particular way, or the shape of a wave hitting a rock in a particular way, that has always felt to me like, oh, that's it. Whatever that is. There's a wordless, ineffable something that has always been perceivable to my eyeball as some big life force. And I think it's the kind of things, if you've ever talked to an astrophysicist or a cosmologist, they're the most mystical people, because they're really in touch with the tiniest and the biggest mysteries. And it's I think my version of that, but it's all about pattern and shape, form, the way light hits pattern and shape and form. And so for me, I'm so visually oriented. Instead of music, right, or sound, I've always seen something and thought, oh my God, that's it. That's truth, beauty. We have all these different words for it, but that's the thing. And it's an honor to be able to photograph something like this and then try to share it. But what I really want, the more that I have put in front of myself in my life, is to help facilitate people to find their own version of that. What is the thing that you recognize as the force in your life that you can figure out a way to look for and find on a regular enough basis that you are fueled to be the person in your community who you're going to thrive being?
right. Don't take yourself so serious.
Please don't
Because
take
it's like
yourself
roadblocks
seriously.
that you just keep running into.
Yeah.
It
No.
really is.
There's some purpose that you have that you can take much more seriously than yourself. And then if you make a fool of yourself, who cares? It's not about you.
I heard a guy say not too long ago, there's more planets and stars out there than there are grains of sand on the earth. And I thought, boy, that really puts everything into
Doesn't it,
perspective,
though?
doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
What's the Milky Way? What do they call that?
A galaxy.
Galaxy. That's what I'm
Yes.
looking for. So, yeah, there's more galaxies out there than there are grains of sand on the earth. I thought, holy cow. Talk about shrinking yourself and making yourself so, all of a sudden the problems that you have in this world, like, oh, that's pretty minimal.
It's minimal, and it's also like we're part of something amazing.
It's
I mean,
amazing,
and
but
how
we're so little.
Yeah, how many of those galaxies have some glob of compounds and elements running around thinking about things? I mean, it's just amazing that we get to spend time in this place, in this format,
Exactly.
with consciousness and curiosity and wondering about purpose and hopefully finding new and deeper ways to connect to one another and ourselves. And we're part of this huge, big mystery.
Right.
And
Just don't take it all so serious.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
so minute. Have some fun,
yeah,
right?
we're a tiny part of a big, beautiful whole that we can serve in our tiny little corners, in
Right.
our itty bitty ways. And that's everything.
Right. So get out there on a surfboard and enjoy it.
Yeah, please do that. We have to connect to joy. There's a lot of difficult work that needs to be done in this world, and if
Sure.
we're not connecting to joy regularly,
Yeah.
then we're not going to do a very good job of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I think I told you about this story. I stopped in San Diego one time and I was like, I'm going to try surfing. and I rented one of those styrofoam boards, and I got about halfway out there, and I look back at the beach, and there's one of those yellow pickup trucks sitting there watching me. This guy's clearly a Yankee, doesn't know what he's doing.
Aw.
But, I tried my best, and now I got bad shoulders from being a builder, so I couldn't pop myself
Oh,
up.
yeah.
And it was just an angry, frustrating time, and it really tells you, man, these guys have been doing this for a long time. This
Yeah.
is not something you just pop up and jump onto and ride a wave in,
It's
is
hard.
it?
It's difficult. I have
it's
to tell you,
extremely difficult.
one of the things that I most love, I took my first surf lesson when I was 40.
Did you?
I went to surf camp, came from the East Coast to go to surf camp in Santa Cruz.
Really?
Yeah, researched and found the easiest
That
place
was
to
it?
paddle out in the
Okay.
continental
Sure,
U.S.
right.
And so it was Richard Schmidt's surf camp,
Mm.
taught at Cowell's Cove at the time. So it's a deep water point break with a flat water paddle out. And it was 6 days, 6 hours per day of surfing.
Wow.
And getting pushed into waves, I stood up twice the whole week.
No kidding.
One time, Richard Schmidt had to drag me to my feet because he guaranteed he would take a picture of all of us on a board. So he grabbed me by the back of my wetsuit and pulled me up on my feet, took a picture, and then I immediately fall off.
That was funny.
But I tell you what, it didn't matter. I mean, it was I think one of the great gifts of surfing for me and starting at that time of life was that I never thought I'd learn. I
Really?
thought I would just always be trying to do this and never be able to do it. So I just let go of performance. It wasn't about that.
Wow, that's
It
a
was
very
about
interesting way to
something
look
else.
at it.
It was
It
so
didn't matter anymore because
freeing.
I'm just going to suck at this forever.
I'm just going to suck at this forever, but it's so fun to suck at this. I'm just going to keep doing it. But,
That's fantastic.
it's like anything. If you do it enough times,
Yeah.
you do start to get stronger.
Right.
You do start to get a little bit
Confident.
better. And, after literally 6 years, I could stand up and turn the board any way I
Really?
wanted to turn the board
Yeah,
in
yeah.
most waves. And, at this point, it's been 17 years. And, now I can every once in a while, if I'm lucky and the wave is right, hang 5 for a second. Yeah.
Ooh.
It's amazing, and then I usually fall off. I can't
Sure.
really get back yet, but it's a lot like what I was talking about a little earlier in our conversation. That I get so many lessons that are not accidentally, but I think really it's a very difficult thing to describe. They're applicable to precisely the challenges that I'm facing in the rest of my life. So I'll give you an example. If I'm in a moment of fear, right, I'm scared because, my mother is ill, or I don't know what's happening. A million things that are,
Something.
politically we seem to be circling the drain, whatever. Something terrible is happening in the world. If I'm in a moment of being governed by fear, and I go out into the surf, then I am going to experience direct consequences from being governed by fear. And they're going to be undeniable, and I'm not going to be able to rationalize or argue my way out of it. I know enough to recognize, okay, that happened because you hesitated on the takeoff, and so you ate it. And so what are you going to do so that fear gets back into its lane? Right? You don't want it out of the car. It's healthy to have fear somewhere in the
Sure.
car, but you also don't want it driving every minute.
Right.
And so I have to figure that out in the context of that particular surf session. And I will either succeed or fail. But that practice, again, in an environment where it doesn't really matter if I succeed or fail, is so instructive. And then I can take that back onto land and I can interact with the family member who thinks very different politically than I do. And I can do it with patience and compassion in a way that I wouldn't have if I hadn't just learned that lesson about
Sure.
fear. So, I think it gets back to what you said earlier, which I think was so wise, which is that we all really need something that we're good at. And for a long time, the thing I was good at was sucking at surfing.
Right.
I mean, it sounds counterintuitive, but it felt
That was my thing.
revolutionary, right?
Sure, right.
To just do this thing that you're bad at and try to learn everything you can in the process of being bad.
Right.
And it was a really beautiful moment. And
Sure.
yeah.
But every minute increase is like, woo!
Oh my gosh.
Small victories.
There's no such thing.
Right?
They're huge.
Yeah.
They look minute to somebody else. But it's like you might as well have, walked across the ceiling as
Sure,
turned that
right.
surfboard.
Sure.
You thought it was impossible.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Something right. Just to be able to redirect the surfboard like,
Yeah,
hey.
exactly. And now, I have a few more injuries. I'm clearly going to have to rethink the way that I do this because I'm just going to surf as much as I can, as often as I can is not not really working as a
Yeah,
strategy
right.
at
Yeah,
this
yeah.
point. I'm going to have to complement it with some strength training, or I don't
Take
know
some
what yet. I'm
days.
trying to figure it out. But even that, I interviewed this amazing surfer named Michael Coleman, who at the time I interviewed him a few years ago, he has ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and so it had been several years since he could surf at that point. And I interviewed him with his wife because he can be a little difficult to understand, but
I
she
see. Right,
understands
right.
him really
Sure.
well. But oh my, you want to talk about a font of wisdom. And it had been a long time since he had surfed, but he's a surfer and he's riding waves even now. Ocean waves are a kind of waves that are really easy for 5 to 6.5 foot vertical primates to handle. We can perceive them, we can wrestle with them, we can understand the way they break. But there are invisible waves happening all the time, in our bodies, in sounds, and the stuff happening all around us, light waves. And it's a way of being. It's very. I haven't. It's hard to put into words, and sometimes the more you try, the sillier you sound. But that interview with him was the moment when I felt most palpably this reality that for some people, the embodied act of riding waves or failing to ride waves is this transformative experience that the thing that honestly it comes closest to, and I didn't know this at the time because this wasn't in the media, and because of my own experience I had never really did substances in this way, but when people describe the kind of awakenings they have after doing psilocybin or other hallucinogens, these guided trips where the fear falls away and you suddenly see how deeply connected everything is, it's something like that. And in that interview with Michael Coleman, who can't get on a board, can't walk up the stairs, but can still get on his motorcycle.
Really?
With his sidecar, and was
right.
going on this huge big motorcycle trip by himself. Can't pump his own gas. I mean, really, you want to talk about riding steep waves, and there really is, for me, in this one practice, a way to deal with the beautiful limitations of what it is to be human, to be mortal. To be tiny in a big world that has nothing to do with whether or not you're actually getting in the ocean every day, but that only comes from having gotten in the ocean a lot of days.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. Right. I think that's part of the draw of coming to California. After raising kids and doing all that and getting them all off to college, and it's like, now there's a little bit of time to where maybe I can go out and get familiar with the ocean. It just seems like it's always been calling to me, and I do all kinds of, did 12 years of racing big sailboats on the Great Lakes and doing the Chicago to Mackinac races and being out on those big boats for 3 days and 3 hours on, 3 hours off, all hands on deck for sail changes. And, you do ride, and it's a really neat thing, but it's not the ocean, it's close. It's brutal, and it'll take you out just as quick, but the ocean waves are so much farther apart. It's almost you're falling down into a well, looking up into these 40 feet above you monsters as you come up over the top of these things. Where in Michigan those waves are, maybe 8 seconds apart tops, maybe 5 seconds apart, which they're wicked and they're mean, but they're coming at you quicker. You're not going into these huge troughs like you guys are riding these waves out. Woo!
Yeah.
It's scary as hell. It's like, I got to go find out more about that, because there's that power.
Yeah, there is.
Great Lakes have some serious power. They take out, the Edmund Fitzgerald, and just taking out some big ships,
Totally.
So.
How exciting. Well, have you sailed here yet?
Well, I've done some of the smaller races, the one series races where everybody's racing the same exact boat, that kind of thing, and a 3-man crew and they're all military and they're all yelling at each other. And it's like, yeah, I'm out.
There's got to be
I'm not
way.
doing this.
Yeah.
You know, I don't come on a boat to get yelled at.
Yeah, no.
You know, and I see they're excited and they're fired up.
Yeah, it's just the way they are intimate with each other and their surroundings.
You get used to a
safe.
crew, right?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
So it wasn't that exciting.
There have to be people who sail to be, you know, one with the wind instead of
Sure.
screaming.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know, well, that's the way you get things done. It's just
some things done, but not other things.
I'm not the kind of person that gets yelled at very well.
Yeah.
I shut down. I don't try to do better.
Yeah, me neither.
Like,
yeah.
Yell at me.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
That is so interesting. Yeah, no, I've never understood the draw of competition in general in my whole life.
Right.
It's been really, you know, and because I was a girl, you know, I didn't have to do that,
Sure.
and I understood the draw of wanting to make the team. That I
Sure,
understood.
right.
Yeah, being a part of the group, but you know, the older I've gotten, the pursuits that I've been interested in, things like hiking and surfing and bicycling, you know, they all had a competitive component, and I did race bikes when I was in college, but only because my friends did, and it's, you know, it always felt like it robbed. It's interesting. I never thought about this. As opposed to getting over yourself, competition makes you center in yourself. You know, it really is about how am I performing in this second, right now. You really have to stay with yourself the whole time.
Right.
Whereas if you're not competing, you know, you are open to all of the others, whether it's the hill you're riding down or the headwind that just picked up, or, you know, it doesn't have to sort of start and end with thoughts about your own performance.
Right.
It's really,
right.
Yeah.
You hear a lot of people say, I'm competing against yesterday's me.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's a great way to look at it. That way you're not so,
trying to
you're
get
just
better.
trying to get better. Self-embetterment, self-improvement, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've really been interested in play and a lot of the research around play in mammals and humans in particular, and how it impacts our brain development. Playful states are really important to creativity and resilience and adaptability, so they say. And there are different play types. Like there are people who are drawn, like some people like sugar, some people like salt, etc. There are people who are drawn to competition. It makes them feel more alive and playful. And I think for me, I was always much more drawn to relational play or collaborative play, and so it just feels like absolutely the wrong thing.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I hope you sail a lot more in the coming years in this beautiful place with its crazy blue water.
Yeah, exactly. I've had a couple of boats out here, but they're expensive to keep. You know.
Oh my gosh, I can only
start
imagine.
Things going wrong with them, it's like, oh boy, I got to get a newer boat.
Yeah.
These things cost too much.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a big problem out here. You know, you see hundreds of boats. You see hundreds of boats out there that nobody ever uses. It's like, how is this possible?
It's so interesting. This is the land of boats people don't sail and houses people don't live in.
Right, that too, right. That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, we've done about an hour and a half on this. Yeah.
It's been so enjoyable.
What have we missed?
I really appreciate this. I feel like I wish I knew more about you now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. What have we missed? I don't know. I can't answer that. I feel like I've said a lot about myself, and I hope I've said enough about relationship with others, and especially the more than human others, that I think our culture often discourages, just in the way we build our environments, in the way we structure our days. I think getting outside and staring at a cloud a little more often, staring at a wave, watching a ripple, would do us all a world of good.
Get into a meditative state more often, and
absolutely
really feel the joys of life.
They don't have to be complicated,
right?
And they really don't have to be expensive,
right?
There isn't necessarily anything wrong with where you are. There may be a lot wrong with where you are, but there may also be something right and beautiful about where you are, that if you're just focused on what's wrong, you might miss drawing strength from that will allow you to address the wrongs more effectively.
Right. You're such an interesting person. Thank you so much for coming on here.
Thank you.
We've had an absolutely blast today. Thank you so much. And,
me too.
Where can people get a hold of your work or get a hold of your classes? I know you're not in California, so.
Well, I do. Most of my groups now are virtual,
Okay.
and I do have workshops and seminars and experiences that I do on request for custom groups.
Perfect.
But wavesToWisdom.com is my website.
That's where they can hold you.
Yeah, they can email me through that. It's Maia@wavesToWisdom.com, and I love to meet new people and talk to folks. So I encourage anybody who wants to reach out for any reason to please do so.
That'd be so cool. Thank you guys for watching. Love you guys. Have a good one.
Thank you, Steve.
See you.